When we look at nature, it often seems so perfect, right? Like this beautiful, harmonious machine. But what happens when you pull one little piece out of that machine? That's what we're going to dig into today. We'll explore the hidden rules of the natural world and see what they tell us about a really big problem. So, let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start right here. Take a look at this. It's pretty powerful, right? A whole herd of elephants just strolling past a railway line. They just seem so out of place. And it immediately makes you ask, what are they doing here? Why are they so close to us instead of, deep in the forest where they belong?
Now, the easy answers, they kind of jump right out at you. Their homes are shrinking because of deforestation. There's less food. The water holes are drying up. And yeah, the climate is changing. But here's the thing. All of that, it's really just the surface of the story. Those are symptoms. The real cause is much, much deeper and way more connected than you might think.
So, to really get to the bottom of why these elephants are on the move, we've got to back up a little bit. We need to understand the absolute fundamentals of how nature works. Let's start with the building blocks.
Okay, first up, the habitat. The easiest way to think about it, it's just an address. It's the natural home for any living thing. We're talking animals, plants, even tiny little microbes. It's the one place where it can find everything it needs to live. And habitats, well, they're not one size fits all. Not at all. You've got a sprawling forest, which is the perfect home for, say, deer and foxes. And then you have a quiet little pond, which is the ideal spot for fish and frogs. Each one is its own little world with its own unique crew of residents.
Now, no matter what kind of habitat we're talking about, a huge forest or a tiny pond, they're all made of two basic types of stuff. First, you've got the biotic parts. That's just a fancy word for all the living things. The plants, the animals, you name it. Then you've got the abiotic parts, the non-living stuff, like sunlight, water, and soil. And you absolutely need both for life to happen. All right, so we've got the place, the habitat, and we know what it's made of, the living and the non-living bits. So what's next? Well, let's look at how all those living things actually organize themselves. It's pretty cool how it goes from just one single creature to a whole complex society. Think about it. You never just have one fish in a pond, do you? Of course not. You have a whole bunch of the same species of fish swimming around together. Well, that group, that's what we call a population. It's kind of the first step up the ladder. Right, but the story doesn't end there. That pond isn't just home to fish. You've also got a population of frogs and a population of dragonflies and even a population of water lilies. When you take all those different populations living together and interacting in that one habitat, now you've got what's called a community. Okay, and this is where it gets really cool. There was this study where scientists just added some fish to a pond and they watched what happened. Get this. The fish ate the dragonfly larvae. So fewer dragonflies grew up. Now, dragonflies normally eat bees. With fewer dragonflies around, the bee population exploded. And what happened then? All those extra bees meant way more pollination for the flowers on the land nearby, which meant way more seeds. Isn't that wild? It's a perfect example of how one tiny change can ripple through the entire system. So that crazy pond story really highlights one of the most important interactions in any community. It all boils down to one simple question: who eats whom? I mean, at its core, this is all about how energy moves from one thing to another. You can think of it like a big natural economy. Every living thing has a job, and that job is all about what it eats. You've got your producers, which are plants. They're the ones making all the energy in the first place. Then you've got herbivores, the plant eaters, and then the carnivores and omnivores who eat other animals. Every single one has a role.
Let's make this super simple. We can build a basic example of this energy flow. It's called a food chain. And every single food chain has to start with a producer, something that gets its energy from the sun. So for us, let's start with some grass.
Okay, step 2. That energy doesn't just stay in the grass. It moves when the grass gets eaten by what we call a primary consumer. Basically an herbivore. In this case, a rabbit.
And to finish our little chain, the rabbit gets eaten by a secondary consumer, a carnivore, like a fox. And there you have it. The energy that started as sunlight hitting the grass has now traveled all the way up to the fox. Pretty simple, right?
Well, yes and no. That simple chain is a good way to understand the basics, but the real world? Oh, it's never that neat and tidy. It's actually a lot messier and, frankly, way more interesting.
See, a food chain is really just one single thread in a huge tapestry. It's only when you start to see how all the different food chains in a habitat connect and overlap, that's when you see the true picture. And it's not a chain at all, it's a food web.
Just look at this. Let's take the mouse, for instance. It doesn't just have one predator. A hawk might eat it, or an owl, or a fox. A snake might go after a frog, or it might go after that same mouse. See? It's not a simple straight line. It's this incredibly complex, messy, beautiful web of connections.
Okay, let's go all the way back to where we started, back to our elephants. Because now that we understand all this, habitats, communities, and this super connected food web, we can look at this picture and see something totally different. The problem isn't just one little thing. The problem is that a really important thread in their web is being pulled.
And this, right here, is the answer to the whole mystery. When you remove the trees, or a waterhole dries up, you're not just removing trees or water. You are yanking on a critical thread that holds the whole web together. The plants disappear. Then the insects that lived on those plants. Then the birds that eat the insects. The whole thing starts to fall apart. And for a massive animal like an elephant, that's not just a small problem, it's a complete system failure. Their home literally can't support them anymore. And that's why they end up on our train tracks. They're desperately searching for the resources and stability that their own natural world has lost.
So, we went on this whole journey, right? From a single photo of an elephant all the way to this idea of a complex food web. And what it shows us so clearly is just how deeply connected everything is, which of course leads to a much, much bigger question. What about us? About our own place in this massive, delicate web? If we keep pulling on these threads, can we survive when the systems that support all life start to come undone? That's definitely something we're thinking about.